Was that spicy enough for you? Hey guys, I'm Phil. Welcome back to another Playground Sessions YouTube live lesson. If things look a little bit different today, that's because once again we've run into a bit of a hurdle today. Guys, we're trying to bring you live lessons every week, and that's ambitious. Today we had some weather in the area that knocked some stuff out, and we lost a lot of our strong internet, so we weren't even able to connect in the way that we usually do. But instead of canceling on you guys, I thought I would hook up my phone on a stick and bring you guys into the studio in whatever way that I can, okay? So today we're gonna be talking about chords. We're gonna be talking about how to spice up your chords, because that's the topic you guys voted on. There was a handful of other topics that got some votes too. It was close, so you may see some repeat topics in the polls to come. But today we're talking about how to spice up your chords. I'm hoping that you guys can see my overhead keys angle here. Good enough for today. Before we get into the lesson, I just want to say I'm not actually able to see your guys' comments right now, unfortunately, because the way that we usually have this rigged up is not working today. So this might be a quicker lesson than usual, but I want to say two things about this before we go on. One is I really, really hope you guys will chime in with the questions and comments that you usually do, because you guys are also great question answerers. I love that about our playground community, is that often other users and students like yourselves will help each other out. So I encourage that, but also I encourage you to write today, because tomorrow this lesson is still going to be around on YouTube, and I am going to go through and answer every single question tomorrow, okay? So it's not quite real time tonight like it usually is in our live lessons, but I promise if you write me something, I'll get back to you tomorrow. In the meantime, I've got a fun lesson for us today talking about how to spice up chords. So let's just get started. First of all, what does that even mean? What does spicing up a chord mean? Well, there's a handful of ways we might see or encounter a chord in music. One is we might see it in sheet music, and we might see the notes notated out. In that context, you're not really supposed to add your own stuff, right? You're supposed to play it how it is on the page. So if there's a boring or a plain chord in notation, we don't want to spice that up, because you're supposed to play it as written. But there's a ton of other scenarios where you may find yourself in a situation where you've got to come up with some chords that are not on the page, not written down on a staff. You might see a chord symbol that just says C, and that means play a C major chord. Okay, there we go. But there's more than one way to play a C major chord, right? You could do it like this. You could do it like this. You could do it like this. Would you believe me if I said you could even do it like this? Or maybe even like this? Or maybe something like this? That was a handful of, and maybe an infinite amount of ways that you can do that just off of one chord symbol. And that might be a little bit intimidating for some of you. Oh man, I thought I was just supposed to play a C chord. Now you're telling me there's infinite possible ways I could do it? Well, there's way more than one right way to do it. So hopefully that makes you feel better. There's 3 notes in a chord. If you play those 3 notes, you're doing it right. There's a handful of other ways, of other notes you can add, other voicings, and things like that that will expand on it. It's still right. There's more than one right way here. So that's one thing I love about this. We're going to talk about how to spice up chords when you get to put your own stuff into the chord. Not when you see a chord in notation, but when you see a chord symbol, or when you're jamming with some friends and your friend's playing guitar and she says, I'm just playing in the key of G, let's jam. What do? You're just going to play a G chord the whole time? No, you got to spice it up, okay? So that's what this lesson is about. First, let's start with the basics. Quickly, very quickly. We got to talk about normal chords, major, minor, and let's talk about dominant. Major is 1, 3, 5, right? We talked a bit about this last week. Minor, you flat the third. Okay, so there's a minor chord. And a dominant chord is major with a flat 7. I had a whole lesson from David Sides queued up, something new that we shot for our new rookie boot camp tour recently, to go over some of this, but I'll handle it for today since we're going on a small rig today. I promise you guys will hear from David later. Major, minor, and dominant. If you see any lead sheet, any piece of music that has a chord symbol, 99% of the time you're going to find mostly those three chords, okay? Especially if you're not playing jazz, if you're playing rock, pop, blues, things like that, okay? So you got to know those chords first. Once you know them, that's the time where you want to expand on them, okay? So we're doing a quick review, major, minor, dominant, but from now on, we're going to assume you guys have that down, okay? There's something called color notes, color tones, that I want to talk about as our first main pillar today. These are notes that you can add to a major chord or a minor chord or a dominant chord to give them some flair. And this is straight up the most straightforward way to talk about spicing up chords, is adding color tones. So there's a couple of rules I want to give you guys, okay? Whenever you have a major chord, like C major, for example, there are a handful of other scale degrees you can add besides the 1, 3, and the 5. And this is true for 90-something% of the time. There's always exceptions, but for the most part, you can always add the following scale degrees to a major chord. You can add the 2, 1, 3, 5. So here's 2. That adds a nice little flavor to it. It's still a C major chord, but now we're playing a C add 2, okay? You can do that to any major chord. You can add the 2. There it is. You can add that 2 in there, okay? You can also add the 6. The 6 in the key of C is the A. Okay, so we can add an A to our C major chord as well. A different flavor, but still a new flavor. We're messing with spices here. We're in the kitchen today, right? So you can add the 2. You can add the 6. Now we're starting to get somewhere, right? You can add the major 7 as well, but that one, I wouldn't say you can add it all the time. There might be more exceptions to that rule, but you can also add the major 7. It'll depend on what else is happening in the music, what's happening with the melody. But yeah, you can add, so here's 1, 3, 5. Here's the 2. Here's the 6. Here's the major 7, or we can put it up here. This is a big, fat, juicy, tasty, spicy chord now, right? It's just a major chord, but we've added a 2, a 6, and a major 7. We could also add, this gets a little weirder too, but we can add the sharp 4 or the sharp 11. That's kind of what I did in the beginning when I was expanding a bit. So here's our C chord. You can add an F sharp to that. That's, I guess if we were using salt and pepper before, the sharp 11 on a major chord is kind of like, I don't know, like ginger or something that, you know, is way out of left field and it can catch you off guard. Okay, so think about the sharp 11 on a major chord as being that more sort of exotic spice, okay? And that sounds like this. Just that F sharp in there alone does some wonders, right? Now you can also combine some of these color tones. So you can add the 9 and the 6. And people might call that a C 6-9 chord, all right, or a C major 6-9. You can also add the 9 and the sharp 11 and the 13, and that does create a whole new triad on top. So if we're just playing those upper notes, we actually get a D major triad on top of our C major triad. Okay, so let's just do a quick recap. For major, here are the rules. You can always add the following spices: the 2 or the 6. Most of the time you can add the major 7, and sometimes you can even add the sharp 4, the sharp 11, okay? I encourage you guys to get familiar with all your different keys, because right now I'm just demoing in the key of C, but the same formula applies for any key. That's why I'm sticking to numbers instead of letters. 2, 6, sharp 11, instead of saying D, A, F sharp, okay? Because it applies to any key. Now let's talk minor. Minor has color tones too, but not the same as major, okay? In fact, we do have one that's the same. You can add the 2. And this is one of the all-time most crunchy, like satisfyingly sad chords, is the minor with the add 2. Okay, C minor with that 2 in there. That crunch between the minor third and the 2 is a half step apart. So it's a lovely crunch if that's the look that you're going for. But just keep in mind, it is a crunch. But you can add the 2. You can also add the 4. So in major, we want to avoid adding the 4. We talked about adding the sharp 4, but we don't want the 4. In minor, however, we do like the 4. Okay, so here's the 4 in minor. In C minor, it's this F note here, right? So if someone said, play a C minor chord, you could say, okay. And a few seconds go by and you're like, okay, I'm done. What else can I do? Well, you could throw the 9 in there. You could also throw the 4 in there. Also adding some rhythm and things like that too, right? But for today's lesson, this is just about adding notes as spices. We'll cover rhythm another time. So minor, we can add the 2, we can add the 4, we can also add the 6. That's a certain kind of a specific spice if we're looking for that. Kind of crunchy. You can also add the flat 6, but this is going to depend on the melody too. When you've got a minor chord, you need to know what's happening around you, melody or other instruments. And if someone's playing the 6, you don't also want to play the flat 6. Okay, the melody would dictate that typically. Otherwise, if you're just jamming, you can kind of alternate. But you want to pick one. You don't want the 6 and the flat 6. The flat 6 sound is kind of like that X-Files sound. Does anyone even watch X-Files? I realized that might have dated me there. But that's a really classic minor sound with a flat 6. C minor with the 6th scale degree flatted. And then, of course, the flat 7, that would make a minor 7 triad. And then just like major, we can combine, we can group some of these extra notes or color tones together in the same chord. And often there will be a triad in the right hand that will cover those. So for C minor, we can add the flat 7, we can add the 9, we can add the 4. That's a beautiful chord, minor 11 or minor 4. And check it out, my left hand, I'm playing a C minor triad. It may be hard for you guys to see with this flipped around angle, I apologize. But the right hand is playing a B flat major triad. It just happens to be covering those extra notes. Flat 7, 9 or 2, and 11 or 4, okay? Let's move on from there. So that's major and minor, and we can do those basic color notes from there. From here, what I'd like to do is talk about something that Harry Connick talked about in his lesson on genres. We talked about this a little bit last week. We talked about like the country chords, if you guys remember that. That was a way for us to extend the life of a chord. And what we're talking about today is not too different. We're talking about spicing up chords. So I want to talk about that today again, but then I want to take it in a different direction. So what I like about the country chord is it eventually gets to the chord you're going for. For those who don't know, let's take a look at a G major chord. The country chord that I'm talking about is a lesson from Harry Connick Jr. in our boot camp, where he talks about playing the 2 scale degree first, then resolving to the 3. So it's a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. It's a 2 to 3 resolution. That's our country chord. Okay. What I like like about that is it isn't just a G chord. It's a G with a 2-3 resolution. It's another kind of a flavor, okay? And so let's take that a step further. What other kind of suspensions can we do? What else can we delay before arriving at our chord as a way to spice up that chord? Well, we talked last week as well about the 4-3 suspension. Same idea, just the 4th scale degree down to the 3rd. You can do that too. So if someone said, hey, let's jam, let's play in the key of G, let's play on a G chord, I might go back and forth between G, I might do the 2-3 resolution, I might do the 4-3 resolution. Let me just give you a quick example of what that might look like. Okay, we're jamming in the key of G. All right, let's do it. So adding a bit of melody there at the end, but really just trying to stick to chords. I'm doing some rhythms and inversions, but hopefully you heard a bit of that, those kind of resolutions between the 2 and the 4, resolving to the 3. It's a great trick to do to spice up your chord, to add some motion and momentum to your chords. Okay, what else can we do? So instead of just thinking of one note that changes, what I like to do is think about a whole chord that we play beforehand, and then it changes to the intended chord. Bear with me here. Let's keep it in the key of C. So I could do a resolution of, let's say, I'll tell you what, I'm going to switch it up for you here. I'm going to throw something new at you. This is kind of cool. When we talk about 2-3 resolution or 4-3, the reason it kind of works, really, ultimately, is because eventually we land on the chord we want to land on. So you may have heard often in music, people refer to this balance of tension and release, okay? Outside of music too, but very often in music. This is that in action. When we delay the resolution to our intended chord, that's that, right? So when we have the 4-3 resolution in the key of G, like Harry does, we have a half step resolution from 4 to 3, just a half step. With the 2-3, it's a whole step, but it's still approaching it just from underneath. So how do we take this idea further? Instead of just having a single note that is a half step away from our intended note, what if we did the whole chord a half step away? I'm giving you guys one of my tricks right now. This is one of my, Chris, David, if you guys are watching, you're about to get one of my tricks here. I like to land on a major chord, my destination chord. Let's call it C here. I like to land on it first by playing the C in the bass, but in my right hand, playing the triad that is a half step below. It's going to sound really bad on its own, but remember, it's important that you then eventually resolve to the chord you're trying to resolve to. That's what makes it work. So what I'm saying here is that I like to play a B major triad on top of my C bass. This would sound terrible out of context. Right? That sounds like the wrong chord. However, if you put it into context, check this out. When you finally make it to that last chord, it justifies what came before. So there's a B major chord in the right hand over a C in the left hand, but then finally there's the tension and then there's the release. So it's not just with single notes that you can delay resolution. It's not just with one note within a chord. You can do it with chords. You can delay resolving to your chord by playing a different chord first, then resolving. I like to do the one that's a half step below because it's a big crunch, but you can do it from anything. So that's something that I think might be fun for us to cover today. I'm glad we snuck that in. I wish I could check in on questions and comments right now, guys. But again, if you're just joining, I want to let you know we're coming to you live here with a pretty basic rig today because we had some internet problems. So I can't actually see your comments right now. I thought it was more important for you to be able to see my full keyboard here. So that's what we went with. But please drop questions and comments for me if you haven't yet, because tomorrow I'm going to pick back up this lesson and I'm going to go down and respond to everyone's questions and comments, okay? In the meantime, guys, let's see. We're going to talk about one more thing, and then we're going to leave it there for tonight, okay? So we talked about color tones. We talked about delaying our resolutions. I'll briefly touch on upper extensions. Think about this as colored tones that are altered. So we talked about adding the 9 to a major chord or a minor chord. Well, an upper extension, an altered note, or an upper extension could be a flat 9 or a sharp 9, okay? We typically don't put those on major or minor chords, but on a dominant chord, you better believe you're going to start to see some altered notes that are referred to as upper extensions. So let me give you an example. C7. That's a major chord with a flat 7, right? That's a C dominant 7 chord. We can add the 9. Sure, that would be a C9 or a C7 add 9. Sure, sounds good. We can add a flat 9 instead, though. And that's a bit more crunchy, right? So that's our 9 or our 2 scale degree, flatted. Dominant 7 chord, flat 9. Again, out of context, it doesn't really sound good, right? It's crunchy. Hey guys, how's it going? Doesn't really work out of context. But when you hear it in context, in a progression, it really can. Let me show you what I mean. Here's a C7 chord. I'm going to go to the flat 9. Then I'm going to resolve to the F chord, the 1 chord. Okay, flat 9 wants to resolve down by a half step to the F major chord. You could also extend that. You could start with a 9, flat the 9, then go to your 1 chord. And when we land on our 1 chord, let's not just play the 1 chord. Let's add some color tones. Let's add the 9 to that. There's a little 2-3 resolution. Let's maybe do the 4-3. That's got a different flavor. Still the same idea, C7 to F. So these upper extensions, when we alter them especially, can really add, just widen the palette, so to speak, okay? You could also do a sharp 9. We can go to. Andrew, if you're watching, I know you were hoping I got to that. But we're going to keep it at the more intermediate level for today. But the main thing here is talking about altering our additional notes. You can add our additional notes. You can add the 9, the 6, whatever. You can also flat the 9, sharp the 13. You know, you can do all sorts of stuff. The more you learn, of course, the more kind of rules there are, but those rules can all be broken. So I love talking about this stuff. We talked about color tones. We talked about delayed resolutions. We talked about upper extensions. The last thing I want to talk about is range. What do I mean by range? When we're talking about playing a rookie or an intermediate level arrangement in the playground song store, for example, typically we have our left hand kind of hanging out in this range, or this area of the keyboard. And we're playing some more basic chords, and we've got our melody right here, right? Even at the advanced level, our left hand is much busier and our range is wider, but we're still typically not playing like full 2-hand chords because we've got melody to play in the right hand. So what I want to talk about is when we find ourselves in chording situations where we need to come up with just chords, whether we're jamming with friends or whatever it is. The same stuff we're applying these rules to today, we can apply this range tip to this stuff as well. And what I want to say is that even a changing range can be a different flavor or a different spice. So let me show you what I mean. Hey guys, let's jam in the key of C. Okay, cool. jamming. Doing my 2 to 3 there. Here's 4 to 3. But after a while, I'm like, oh, are we done? Nope, still playing. Okay, that can start to get boring, even when I'm putting in those tricks from earlier. So then what I might do is play that for a while and then change my range, okay? So I'm down here. I've been down here for a while. Now I'm gonna do this, ready? Now check this out. Range, you got to use the 88 keys, you guys. And if you're playing on a keyboard that doesn't have 88 keys, that's fine too. Just make sure you're using the full wide range of what you do have, because you have them there. Okay, if we're talking about adding spice and flavor and color to this stuff, of course you want to use your whole instrument. Now, when you're voicing something up high versus voicing it down low, you're not really typically going to play the exact same voicing. So I'm going to leave you with 2 tips before we wrap up this lesson. When you're talking about opening up your range to a wider range. The first thing is, when you're playing up high, actually, let's start with low. When we're playing down low, we don't want to get too muddy. We don't want to get too close together with our notes. We want to take our intervals and keep them spread. And that's because it's just low down here. It's harder to differentiate between the notes when they're close, okay? So when I'm playing a C7 chord, in the middle of the piano, I could do it like this. I probably wouldn't, but if I did, I'm not going to do it like this down here. You can't even tell what chord that is, because I've got a lot of close intervals here. So I'm going to open that up. I've got the root, 5th, 3rd, and 7 here. I'm just going to do that. I don't want to get any closer together with my notes than this. And notice you can actually hear this chord a bit clearer now, right? When I go higher, I'm not going to play this exact chord. I could, but it actually sounds a bit empty up top, right? High up, we have plenty of room to get tighter with our notes. So if we're going to play sort of a tighter voicing, we can do it up here. But I also like to use octaves up top too, because it strengthens whatever note I'm using to put the octave on. So C7 down here, I might do it like this. But up here, I might play an octave C. And I might play just 3rd and 7s in the left hand. So I'm not playing roots, really, with my left hand up here. I might in my right hand. But that sounds way different, right, than down here. Same chord, C7. If I was going to play it in here, I might do this. And there's a 9 in there. Or maybe I could add some upper extensions. Go up here and voice it differently. Use octaves. Then I'm going to land on my major chord. I got a major 7 and a 9 in there. B over C, resolving to C major. That was just me trying to put a couple of the things we talked about today into action for you. But guys, please, I want to tell you one more time, please leave comments and questions for me today. I'm so sorry I couldn't get to them live, but tomorrow I'm going to respond to all of your stuff, I promise. A couple of quick things to wrap up here before we close out. I want to just say kind of what's new going on the channel right now, or with the company. We're doing a holiday challenge. So if you're not a part of our Facebook community yet, you got to go join that. And basically, you join our community full of other playground users just like yourself, and people are sharing progress videos. It's super cool to see. People are also lately, it's been fun to see people have started their own hashtag for playground setup. And so what that is people are sharing like pictures or videos of their setup with their computer and their keyboard. That's been fun to see too. So I want to encourage everyone to do that. Join the community, share your setups, and meet your fellow playgrounders. Guys, next time, I promise we're going to try to get this internet issue fixed and give you all the camera angles that you've come to enjoy. But for now, I hope today wasn't too bad. I hope you were still able to get something from our spicy chords lesson. I'm going to leave it there, guys. I'm going to play some chords for you, and then we'll see you next time. Thanks for watching.